New York City, July 13, 1977. A summer storm brews over the skyline. Lightning rips the air above the Hudson, jagged veins tearing the clouds apart. Then, darkness. The lights of Manhattan flicker once, twice, and vanish. From the Bronx to Brooklyn, from Queens to Staten Island. The city of 8 million is blind. The blackout was sudden, complete, suffocating. Radios stuttered, subways froze mid-tunnel. Apartment towers became tombs of heat and silence. The skyline, once a crown of fire, vanished into the storm. 4. The first time in decades the city was a shadow of itself. The official record tells you what came next. Looting, arson, chaos. The statistics are burned into history. Over 1,600 stores damaged. More than 1,000 fires set. Thousands arrested. New York became its own battlefield for 25 hours. That's the headline. The story preserved in archives and documentaries. But that's not the whole truth. Because hidden among the records are fragments, whispered testimonies, scattered reports. Things so strange they were buried before morning. Residents described shadows moving too fast to be human. Shapes leaping between rooftops, eyes that glowed in alleys, and screams that didn't sound like anything the city had ever known. One Bronx resident, years later, said, "I thought it was wolves in the city, but too big, too tall. They weren't running on 4 legs, they were chasing people on 2. His statement was dismissed, folded into the hysteria of that night. But he wasn't the only one. Even the NYPD records, redacted and sealed, mention large animal sightings in Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Lower East Side. Some officers filed notes of being attacked, not by looters but by something with claws. Those reports vanished, marked as anomalies, filed under riot hysteria, yet ask the people who were there, and the story takes a different shape. The looters weren't the only predators that night. The blackout was more than chaos, it was cover, because when the lights went out, something else woke up, something that had always been hiding in the cracks of the city, the subways, the rooftops, the forgotten spaces where moonlight never quite reached. And as the city tore itself apart, the wolves came out. The blackout hit like a hammer, and within minutes the city boiled over. Storefronts shattered, flames rose in Harlem, Bushwick, and the South Bronx. Radios crackled with panic, police dispatchers begging for reinforcements they didn't have. By midnight, the city was no longer New York. It was a battlefield lit by fire and moonlight. The papers will tell you looters ruled the streets that night. And yes, some did. But what about the stories that didn't fit? Residents described hearing howls between the sirens. Not the angry chants of rioters, not the bark of dogs. Howls, long, guttural, vibrating off brick and steel. In Queens, a woman swore she saw shadows climbing an apartment wall like spiders. But when she looked again, they moved on 2 legs. Furred and massive in Bushwick, firefighters called to extinguish a blaze never made it back. Their truck was found abandoned, lights spinning, doors open. The hoses were clawed through as if by talons. Reports said they were overwhelmed by rioters. The families never believed it. Looters ran with stolen televisions and radios, but some of those looters dropped their prizes mid-stride. Eyewitnesses claimed they were chased, dragged into alleys, screams muffled in the dark. Bodies were found the next morning, torn and mauled. Official reports blamed stampedes, hysteria. The morgue records told another story. Lacerations too, deep for knives, bite marks too wide for men. And there were the rooftops. Survivors in Harlem recalled looking up at the glow of fire, only to see shapes moving above them, huge, fast, leaping from building to building with inhuman strength. Some thought it was looters trying to escape police. Others whispered it was something older, something waiting for the perfect night to hunt. The blackout wasn't just opportunity, it was invitation. With the lights gone, the city belonged to shadows, and shadows, it turns out, were hungry. One police officer later confessed anonymously, "We thought we were fighting looters. Then I saw what tore through a car door like it was paper. I emptied my revolver, it didn't fall, it just stared at me and ran." His statement never made the record, so yes, there were looters. Yes, there was fire. But in the streets of New York that night, chaos had more than one face. The predators weren't all human. By midnight, the city was already tearing itself apart. But on 135th Street in Harlem, something happened that would never make the morning papers. The first attack, The block was lit only by fire. Looters smashed into storefronts, dragging out appliances. Arms full of bottles, neighbors screamed from their windows, some begging, others joining in the frenzy. But in the chaos there was another sound, a howl. It was low at first, almost swallowed by the roar of fire and glass. But it rose, bending the air, deep and guttural, vibrating in the chest of everyone who heard it. The looters froze, the neighbors went silent. Then the shape appeared. At the corner of the street, under the broken glow of a burning lamppost, a figure stepped out of the smoke. 7 feet tall, hunched, its fur bristling in the heat. Its eyes glowed amber, catching the fire like mirrors. Its teeth, too long, too sharp, dripped with saliva, and its claws scraped the pavement as it moved. Someone screamed, "Dog!" and ran. But it wasn't a dog. The beast lunged. It crossed the distance faster than any man could run, tackling one of the looters. A single slash opened him like paper, blood spraying across the wall. Panic erupted. People ran, crashing into each other, dropping everything they carried. The wolf didn't chase all of them. It stalked, chose. Ripped through the ones who screamed the loudest. A man ducked into a corner bodega, slamming the door shut. Inside, families huddled, whispering prayers, but the thing didn't need to see. It smelled. It turned, claws carving the wood, tearing chunks out of the frame. They screamed inside, certain the door would give. Then, as suddenly as it began, the scratching stopped. The wolf had found something else. Up above, survivors swore they saw it leap, straight up, claws catching a fire escape. It scrambled up the building, claws clinking against metal, and disappeared onto the rooftops. The next scream came from above as a man leaning out of his window was dragged upward, vanishing into the black. By morning, the police would claim looters killed each other in the dark. But the morgue knew better. One coroner admitted years later that the wounds were too savage to be human. The bodies were filed as riot deaths, but the marks told another story. The city was in chaos, but this was something else. The first attack wasn't just murder, it was the beginning of a hunt. The blackout turned New York into a forest of fire and shadow. Streets burned below, but the rooftops became hunting grounds. And in the hours after midnight, the wolves of the blackout weren't just seen, they were witnessed. In Harlem, a teenager named Luis clung to his bedroom window, watching the streets below, looters scattered like ants, cops nowhere in sight. Then he heard it, a thud on the roof above. He swore the ceiling shook with weight too heavy for any man. He leaned out, just long enough to see a silhouette loping across the rooftop. Long arms hunched back, claws scraping tar. The figure paused, looked down at him with burning eyes, and then leapt, clearing a 15-foot gap to the next building in a single bound. Luis never looked out of a window at night again. Across the river in Brooklyn, firefighters struggling with a blaze in Bushwick reported shadows crossing the roofs around them. One man shouted that looters were cornering them from above. But when the silhouettes passed under the moonlight, they weren't men. Their heads stretched into muzzles, ears sharp and twitching. The creatures moved together, circling, coordinating. Pack behavior. Within minutes, the fire crew scattered. Only half of them made it out. On the Lower East Side, a woman named Gloria swore she saw 3 of them leap between buildings, silhouetted against the flames. They didn't chase her. They didn't need to. She said they moved like predators, already in control. It wasn't chaos to them, she whispered years later. It was order, a hunt, and the police. Buried in the blackout reports, there's a single line from an unnamed officer. Subjects appear on rooftops, unknown, inhuman speed, eyes reflecting light. That entry vanished in later copies. It wasn't just one wolf. It wasn't a lone beast, prowling the dark. It was many packs, moving in formation, choosing their kills, dragging people from fire escapes and windows. The looters fled, the police retreated, but the wolves went higher. They turned the skyline into their hunting ground. Witnesses described it like something out of mythology, shapes leaping against the fire glow, howls bouncing off concrete canyons, predators in the heart of the city, visible only because the lights were gone. The blackout wolves weren't rumor anymore, they were spectacle, and their hunt was only just beginning. The morning after the blackout, the city awoke to ashes and scars. Over 1,000 fires, thousands arrested, whole neighborhoods in ruin. The headlines screamed of looters, thieves, chaos. But buried beneath the ink were files that told another story. The NYPD logged more than 3,000 incident reports during those 25 hours of darkness. Most were theft, arson, assaults. But scattered among them like cracks in the pavement were anomalies. Notes written in haste, observations never meant to reach daylight. One sergeant in Harlem described responding to screams near 135th. His statement: victims mauled, large animal present, fired 6 rounds. Negative effect, retreated. The report was redacted. The officer's name struck from later copies. In Brooklyn, a patrol car radioed in at 2:13 a.m. Something on the roof, not human, moving fast. That tape was seized, replaced with static. The morgue saw the truth most clearly. By dawn, bodies flooded in, tagged with causes of death that didn't fit riot hysteria. Bite marks stretching wider than a man's jaw. Deep claw gouges, 4 parallel, tearing through rib cages. One coroner, decades later, admitted in an anonymous interview, "We were told to write blunt trauma, stab wounds, fire injuries. But those weren't stab wounds, and nothing blunt makes a mark like teeth." Even stranger were the missing reports. Case numbers existed, but no paperwork behind them. Witness lists erased, autopsy notes vanished. Whole sections of precinct logs gone. Some believed they were stolen by rioters. Others whispered that higher offices in the government ordered a sweep, sealing away anything that proved the predators weren't men at all. The blackout ended, but the silence after was louder. Officers who filed animal sighting reports were reassigned. Some quit, others never spoke of that night again. Families of the missing begged for answers. They were told their loved ones died. In riots, burned in fires, swallowed by hysteria. The truth was buried under paperwork, or more precisely, under its absence. What remains today are fragments, half-erased statements, whispered testimonies, and one chilling note scrawled in the margin of a precinct log. Not looters, not men, they were hunting in packs, why lie? The answer never came. The files were buried. The evidence disappeared. The official record closed the case as one night of chaos. But for those who saw the bodies, heard the howls, and watched shadows leap across rooftops, the truth was obvious. The Blackout wolves weren't hysteria. They were documented, and then erased. History books will tell you the blackout began with lightning. A storm rolled across the Hudson, striking transmission lines, toppling breakers, plunging the city into chaos. That's the version taught in classrooms. Clean, simple, natural. But conspiracy whispers paint a darker picture. Some believe the storm was only the excuse, the perfect scapegoat for a shutdown that was planned. Engineers later admitted the failures cascaded faster than they should have. Backup systems never engaged. The grid didn't just collapse, it was pulled, and the timing. A full moon, high and bright over Manhattan. Coincidence or design? Because the wolves didn't appear out of nowhere, survivors swore they'd been there before, lurking in alleys, prowling the tunnels, flashes of glowing eyes in the subway. Long before 1977, always rumors, always dismissed. Until the night the city went dark and the predators had free rein, was the blackout engineered to draw them out? To test containment? To flush the city's secret monsters into the open where they could be studied or destroyed? The response afterward suggests someone knew more than they should have. Federal agents swarmed the city, not just for riot control, but for collection. Witnesses claim to see trucks hauling away crates in the early morning. Guarded by men in unmarked uniforms, police who reported animal attacks were silenced or reassigned. Journalists chasing the story found their notes confiscated. The official narrative calcified fast. Looters, fires, nothing else. But the survivors. Never forgot, and the evidence never entirely disappeared. Scattered testimonies, claw marks etched into rooftops. Morgue records too strange to erase completely. Each piece alone could be written off as hysteria. Together, they paint something far worse. The blackout wasn't just catastrophe, it was cover. If the wolves were unleashed, someone wanted them unleashed. If the city was silenced, someone wanted it silent. The truth, we may never know. Was it lightning? A freak act of nature? Or was the grid itself sabotaged, the darkness not an accident but a cage pulled over 8 million people to see what moved when the lights were gone? The answer hides in the silence between the official records, but one thing is certain: the cover-up worked. New York remembers the looters, the fires, the chaos, but not the wolves. And that's exactly how they wanted it. The blackout ended. After 25 hours, the lights came back with a roar. Air conditioners sputtering alive, radios hissing static, neon signs flickering back into color. To the city, it was salvation. To the survivors, it was erasure. The fires were smothered, the looters rounded up, the newsreels rolled, order restored, the narrative sealed. But in the silence under the celebration, the truth still growled. Because not everything disappeared when the grid returned, some families never found their missing. They were told their loved ones fled, burned, lost in the chaos. But the bodies were never returned, never accounted for. Some morgue drawers sat empty, names scratched out, tags misfiled. Whispers say the missing weren't taken by crime or flame. They were taken by claws. The rooftops carried their scars too, tar torn by gouges too deep for tools. Claw marks along ledges where no man could hang. Fire escapes bent, twisted, wrenched as if by monstrous strength. Some were quietly repaired, others left to rust. Ignored by a city that didn't want to look too closely, the survivors spoke when they dared, but most were silenced by ridicule or fear. Luis in Harlem, Gloria on the Lower East Side. The firefighters who never forgot the shadows circling overhead. Their stories became urban legend, dismissed, forgotten, but never disproven. And still, every so often, the echoes return. In the years after '77, power outages across New York carried a peculiar fear. People held their breath when the lights flickered, afraid the night might come back, that the wolves might return to finish what they started. Fishermen along the East River swore they heard howls on certain nights, carried low on the wind between the bridges. Transit workers claim the tunnels still hold shapes that watch from the dark, too patient to be rats. Some say the wolves never left, that they learned the alleys, the rooftops, the tunnels, that they adapted, that they're still here, waiting for the city to fall silent again. The official story remains clean: a storm, a blackout, a riot. But if you strip away the lies, listen to the scars, you hear something else. A warning, because the night the lights died, the city learned what hunts in its shadows, and every flicker, every outage, every thunderstorm is a reminder. The wolves are still listening, and when the lights go out again, they'll be waiting. And for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.